Funding for Elwood City Limits is brought to you by Facebook,
Facebook.com/Elwood City Limits,
Twitter,
@ECL Podcast,
Tumblr,
ElwoodCityLimits.tumblr.com,
email,
ElwoodCityLimits@gmail.com,
and by contributions from listeners like you.
literally at ElwoodCityLimits.libsyn.com.
Thank you.
Cha-ching, cha-ching, baby.
Well, I decided to start off this podcast right. I got a sweet new haircut yesterday.
Wow, you got a haircut, Will. The Eagles are the Super Bowl champions. There's a lot going on in the world.
It's all coming together, baby.
February's up to a rip-roaring start.
And boy, won't those people on your Facebook just let you know about it. So I kind of made this one of the posts this week on our social media. How many people did you have on your social media who were excited about the Eagles win versus Patriots fans who were not excited about all the bad calls?
So, I mean, I think our results are skewed by where we live geographically.
Yeah.
Of course, we're in Halifax, Nova Scotia, a place that has no professional football team, and the nearest one in sheer mileage, like if you were to pick out on a map what team is the closest to us, it is the New England Patriots. So most people around here are, which I hate to say, New England Patriots fans. So the majority of my timeline were people upset. But anybody who had a more global view on the world, we're happy to see the Eagles win. A little bit of an underdog story there.
I was happy.
I mean, honestly, I like to keep up with it just because it's like, you know, everybody likes to talk about the Super Bowl at the water cooler. These is probably my least favorite two teams in all of the NFL. So I could kind of care less, but it's still exciting to talk about.
I was happy at least because my friend is a big Eagles fan, so I was glad to see them get their due and see him be happy about that. Welcome, everybody. No, this isn't NFL Hour with Will and Lucas. This is, believe it or not, the Elwood City Limits podcast. It's the episodic Arthur podcast. That's right, the PBS children's show, Arthur. My name is Will Young. That's Lucas Mancini.
Hello.
So before we get into our stories this week, we've got a couple.
Well, I'm watching my stories. You got to keep it down. I'm trying to watch Arthur.
The Young and the Arthur. The bold
Arthur Hospital.
Yeah. I was going to try and mix Arthur and Passions, but nah, that doesn't really work as well.
I was just going to say Arthur Rations. God. When was the last time you watched Passions? That show, like, people always mix it with, like, all those other soap operas, but what people forget is that Passions is nuts. It's, like, absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, I to be honest with you, so there was a period when, so my grandmother, when she was alive, used to watch General Hospital, and my sister used to watch General Hospital, and so I never did, but Passions was on like at around the same time, and I remember kids on the playground were like talking about it, and it is like it was one of the ones that had like supernatural elements in it.
That's what I'm saying. Like, most soap operas, the craziest they'll get will be someone will die and then come back with an eye patch, and it'll be like, oh my goodness, you've been actually sleeping with my twin brother. That's like the most out there, most soap operas will get. But Passions was like, there was like a mute girl who could only talk through text message, and they would superimpose the text messages on the screen, and there was like witches, and like people got trapped inside people's minds and stuff. Passions is weird.
Wasn't there like one of the characters was like a little boy, or he was like a living doll or something like that?
Oh my goodness gracious! If that is true, I believe you. Like, I'll take it all on face value. You can tell me almost anything about Passions, and I believe you.
I think that we've got our spin-off show for Elwood City Limits. we've got the plans ready to go for Passions Cast or whatever it is going to be.
Oh my gosh. I guarantee that already exists.
You know what? I should look that up. Also, I'm definitely going to read the Passions Wikipedia page after this. Looks like it's going to be full of fun tidbits galore. Okay, so we are going to answer some viewer mail, and Tumblr asks here before we get into the episode at large. So I've got a couple of Tumblrs here, and one of them is a couple weeks old, so I apologize for how late I'm getting around to it. So let's go to that one first. Anonymous says, I was re-listening to the Background Blues and Now Let's Talk Some Kids podcast, and it hit me that so many of these Arthur episodes are based around class projects. If you were in Mr. Ratburn's class, what project would you be most interested in? The family tree, the animal report, the ancient civilizations assignment, etc. We've had a lot of them so far. Ratburn's a creative guy.
It's true. A lot of his, I wonder, for a second I was going to say I wonder which class Ratburn teaches, but of course it's elementary school, so he teaches all subjects. I mean, Ancient Societies is always pretty interesting. But so is Animal Report. I like how, this is something that'd be frustrating for a kid, but it's kind of invigorating for someone our age, is how open-ended his projects tend to be. It's like, you have to do a report on an animal, but it could be literally any animal of your choosing. Which is really fun because you have a lot of options. Whereas a kid, you probably want a little bit more direction, and that's actually probably more frustrating than exciting. But I don't know. I'd have to think about that. Which one I'd most like to do.
Not just open-ended in terms of subject matter, but also in terms of like presentation. Like it always
that's
ends
right.
up. There's a lot of episodes that end with like, hey, like we've chosen to do this as like an illustration or a demonstration or an interpretive dance or what have you. So
we're gonna actually wrap Binky up like a mummy.
So I think you and I would probably like collab on a rap of some type.
Yeah, oh my goodness, a real schoolhouse rock like rap about phonics type.
Absolutely.
Oh, yikes.
Absolutely.
That would make like a cringe compilation or something.
Yeah, but thankfully it would be before YouTube, so that's not going anywhere. We also have one here from Kevlar Ninja. To answer that previous question, I can't really think of one in particular, but I would like to do a nice old-fashioned tell me about this animal 2-page report. That's just sounds like a nice breeze. Kevlar Ninja was listening to the episode Binky Garbage, and the bit about Crazy Bus reminded them of when they learned... Excuse me, I'll read this in there. It reminded me of when I learned how they retired Crazy Bus from the show, since the guy who wrote it was involved in some case of fraud with Nelvana, the animation studio, on the first couple of seasons. So maybe that's why they like literally threw the Crazy Bus CD in the trash.
Oh, so is that like the end of Crazy Bus? Like they're never going to mention it again?
I mean, I don't know. I can't think of anything off the top of my head where Crazy Bus. I'm not sure.
That's crazy. The guy who wrote Crazy Bus is like involved in fraud. That's like Lil Wayne and Birdman. Like they're gonna keep using Crazy Bus without the writer's permission or something. That's really interesting.
You will have to keep an eye out to see if Crazy Bus ever does indeed return. We also got thank you both for the Tumblr asks. Appreciate it. We also have an email to elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com from Dylan. It's titled Location of Arthur. He says, I can't believe it took me this long to confirm it for you guys, but Elwood City is based off of Mark Brown's hometown in Pennsylvania. So Elwood City, if it was set in the States, would be in Pennsylvania. Also of note, CNR, who sponsored and created Arthur, is a Canadian production company. Later, Cookie Jar Entertainment, that produced the show after Season 8, was also a Canadian production company, too. So we've got some roots in Pennsylvania and some roots in the good old land of the red and white, Canada.
Remember the episode where Binky is the only one that knows the painting's upside down?
Yes.
I think that was a clue that led us to, it was the museum, because that real painting, we figured out it was in the Museum of Philadelphia, I think, which is very close to Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. Though it might have actually been Pittsburgh, but I remember it was around that area. So that was the only clue that led us, and I mean, Pennsylvania is in the American, the Northwest, or whatever it's called. So that fits all of our clues thus far.
Right, we've kind of narrowed it down to like Pennsylvania is a front runner. I think Boston was also one, But yeah, it's I think Pennsylvania has at least has a little bit less of a regional accent, maybe. So yeah, we've got some real leads right here. Hey, one day we're hoping for actual coordinates of Elwood City. So
That's right. I want to see a geotag.
all right, well, thank you, everybody, for your responses to the podcast. Keep them coming. We love to hear from you. And let's get to it. Today, we are talking about, first of all, popular girls. Was this a bit of a confusing episode title before you actually figured out what it was about?
She's so popular. Yeah, I had no idea what this episode was going to be, especially because the way it starts, where it's Arthur talking about this weirdo spring vacation where it's not actually a vacation because you still have to go to daycare or day camps.
Did you ever do spring break day camps? Because that was I did a lot of day camps when I was a kid, because even when school wasn't in, my mom didn't want me lazing around the house or not doing anything. So she signed me up for all kinds of day camps. Maybe not during March break or anything like that, but very much during the summer.
Yeah, same here during the summer, and I was always jealous of my friends who didn't have to go to day camps. They could just do whatever they wanted all summer long. But for this, I'm really confused because Arthur's saying spring vacation's 1 week, so we have to go to these day camps, but they seem to be school-sponsored day camps because Mr. Rappard's running a lot of them. I don't know if he just does it in his off time and it's a coincidence, but it's weird because all of Arthur's friends are also in it. It's very confusing.
Yeah, that was the thing that was this seems to be school mandated, maybe. So
yeah, not much of a vacation, if you ask me.
Yeah, that's kind of too bad. But Arthur is starting the episode explaining that of all the stuff he gets to do in these spring break camps. So Mr. Ratburn has a scene where he and Arthur and a couple of the girls are reenacting Macbeth. Buster had a group that found antiquities, which he has trouble reading, which I thought was kind of funny. And it's all stuff that only 90s kids will know. So pogo sticks, record players, rotary phones, and I'm like, hey, I know what those things are.
Yeah, I guess pogo sticks aren't really antiquities. I could go out and buy a pogo stick today.
And neither are record players, since they've come back in the last decade or so.
That's right. You go to an Urban Outfitters, there's nothing antique about spending $120 on a bad record player.
Mm. And some of the older kids, like Binky, Prunella, and the Tough Customers, are doing some clay sculptures. And then finally, Fern, Francine, and Sue Ellen are laughing at a magazine. Arthur's like, no, not that. So I guess that's the hook? ?
Is it revealed that it's a magazine at that point? Because I wrote down, yeah, it's like a cliffhanger because you can't really see what they're laughing at. They're laughing at something, and Arthur's like, no.
Yeah, knowing what was coming, it's oh, okay, they're looking at the magazine, but yeah, it's not immediately present. So after the cold open, everybody is packing up random stuff into their backpacks, which I must note, everybody has the same green backpack. The point is that Catherine and Francine have the same backpack, and so they accidentally take each other's. But everybody has this green backpack. How does this not happen on the daily with everybody in the spring break camp?
Jan sports were popular. What can I say?
So it's them bringing materials for. So Arthur has a bunch of knickknacks that he's gonna make an instrument out of, and Buster and Brain want to create a futuristic suit of armor. However, Jenna and Muffy, who are in their group, want to weave baskets.
and the disdain in Brain's voice as he's talking about we want to create a suit of armor and they want to weave baskets is great. Good delivery on that line.
Yeah. We get a little hint here of what's going to happen. Fern, thankfully, is a main character in this episode, and she meekly offers to read a poem during the song that they're going to do, and then is immediately shot down by Francine. So Francine...
She kind of pulls the book out of her book bag, the book of poems.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, no, we're not going to do that. And she slowly pushes it back in.
Yeah, just oh, I guess it is a bad idea. So Francine upturns her backpack, realizes it's Catherine's, and they find the magazine, which is called Popular Girl, which is kind of a Elwood City version.
Tiger Beat.
Yeah, Tiger Beat was the first one I thought of.
J14.
Yep. Is there? I think there's like a teen version of Cosmo too.
Do you know what's crazy about those magazines? Is when I was a kid, back in my day, they were all like Disney stars or whatever. Like those are the type of people that would be on the cover of like a J14 or something.
Yep.
Yeah, like your Jonas Brothers, your that sort of caliber of teen celebrity.
Yep.
Nowadays, it's all influencers.
Really?
It's all, yeah, if you look at one of those magazines now, it's all YouTubers and Vine stars. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, so we're talking like, instead of the Backstreet Boys, it's like, hey, here's Lele Pons or something.
Exactly. Here's the Paul brothers.
Yeah. Huh. Well, that really seems to be taking off with kids these days. My God. In a way that I guess it never could when we were kids. So I find it interesting how they are very popular, and I'll be even more interested in a decade or so to see how the kids of today look back on their life with influencers, just as we're kind of doing now with boy bands and all this kind of stuff. We get a good one here where it's like they're all reading Popular Girl on the playground, and Muffy comes up and just like to Arthur, who has it open, just like, "Are you reading Popular Girl?" And Arthur immediately pawns off like, "Not me." Like he just got caught. And so they start doing the quiz in Popular Girl, which the thing of this whole episode is that they think initially that because this is written for teenagers, that it's like scientific and like irrefutable, and there's like a kind of mystical power to it. So there's a quiz here that they all decide to take. I wrote down the first question.
Do you remember these quizzes, like in these like J14 type magazines? It's funny because they've also almost become obsolete due to the invention of BuzzFeed. Now these would all be like BuzzFeed quizzes, like you pick 3 desserts and we'll tell you what supernatural character you are. But I remember back in the day, it was like, yeah, what's your personality type in this Teen Vogue? Answer these questions and we'll tell you how to get like a boyfriend or whatever. It's just funny because I feel like they're not like these quizzes are kind of made obsolete by BuzzFeed.
That's a good point, although I must disagree because at the time I was not reading J14, I was reading Wizard magazine.
That's right. I would have been reading Disney Adventures magazine.
Oh,
which member of which Sonic Heroes team are you? Are you Team Chaotix or are you Team Sonic?
I had a Disney Adventures subscription for several years. I loved that magazine so much. Or
it was like small, like a Reader's Digest, right? Like it wasn't a full-size magazine.
Yeah, it was very small. Or the Canadian publication The Magazine, Not for Adults.
I'm not familiar.
Yeah, it's kind of an also ran around those times. Kids Digests also had their time. So the question is, if you were a sandwich, your friends would be A, potato chips, B, diet soda, C, the plate, or D, hungry. What do you think?
I would say D, hungry, because I'm delicious and everybody wants a bite.
I would say potato chips because they're a great addition to my life.
Your life, yeah. And Buster and Arthur would agree with you because even though they initially scoff at the magazine quiz, whenever they hear this question, they immediately pop their heads back out and both yell, "Hey!"
Yeah, Arthur and Brain do that, and Buster just goes, "If we eat our friends, do we fail the test?" They also have another question that they work on. Your idea of fun is A, going to a big party, B, going shopping, C, going to the library, D, going to the kitchen. What do you think for that one?
All of the above except for D.
What are you talking about? Going to the kitchen's a good time.
I mean, making food's a lot of work.
I guess that's true. But you know what else is in the kitchen is potato chips. Stuff in the fridge.
Touche.
Stuff in the fridge.
Touche. I'd probably, of these 3, I'd probably say, shopping if I got the money.
I would say going to the library.
You know what? I thought you might say that.
Yeah, I love going to the library.
You're a well-learned fellow.
I wouldn't say that. I just, like to read comic books. I will mention here, since we talked about the kitchen, maybe I'll put this up on our social media this week. Did you see my disastrous attempt at making chocolate chip cookies?
I did see that.
Basically, folks, what happened is that I made many mistakes. One of them was making a recipe that was going to make like 42 cookies, which, considering they were all for me, I didn't research well enough. So basically, what happened is I made a slightly burnt, basically chocolate chip puddle,
like a very, very fine chocolate chip like crust, like a crumble if it was very thin.
Yeah, kinda. It was pretty sad, but Jenna, my fiance, got a big laugh out of it, so it wasn't all lost. And she didn't mind that I wasted like a bunch of her ingredients. So I'll try again, but I'll show you sometime this week of the disaster that was my attempt at chocolate chip cookies. So the wind takes the magazine and puts it into the mud, so they never get the chance to finish the quiz. So most of the kids end up giving up. Francine and Arthur have this discussion about how they're kind of nervous about becoming teenagers, about like, is that how we'll think when we're their age? And it reminded me of like when I was 11 or 12, like on the cusp of becoming a teenager. I was like, so what's going to happen here? Like, am I just going to like totally change? Being a teenager is kind of intimidating.
Francine's got a really like poignant line about, she goes, sometimes I think about what it's going to be like when we're their age, and I don't sleep for hours.
Yeah. But Fern steals the magazine from the trash because she really wants to know her score, and she's joined by Sue Ellen, who they both want to they're both very curious about it. So they go to the Sugar Bowl, finish their quiz.
I love this character pairing, by the way. Sue Ellen and Fern make such a great pairing because they're opposites, much like Paul Abdul and DJ Scat Cat. Fern is an introvert and she's quiet, and Sue Ellen is an extrovert. You know, she's very worldly. I think they're perfect contrast for one another, so it's a really fun pairing, and fun to have an all-girl pairing.
Yeah, I like that they get the spotlight as well. Those are two characters that are kind of secondary, that don't get the chance to shine very much, and that's a great point. Like, they are indeed like diametric opposites, and it's something you don't realize until you have them both next to each other. I'm like, oh wow, yeah, these two could not be less alike, but they still get along pretty well. Fern underscores on the test, which means the test says she's too quiet and she needs to kind of speak her mind or else risk being ignored forever. We get this
I love how the answers are written exactly like a real like teen magazine would. Like they don't seem like they're written in a way just to push the plot forward. Like, they use the exact language and sort of prose that like one of those magazines would use. Like, people forget you exist. Like, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, everything is written in a very specific way, especially teen magazines. It's meant to appeal to that age group, and I think you're right. It is meant. It kind of zeroes in on what the anxieties of a teenager would be. So, like, you know, not knowing you exist, or people thinking that you're people being too afraid of how good you are. We get a cutaway of Fern, and it's like Mr. Ratburn taking roll, and then he calls for Fern, and she goes like, here I am, but she's like transparent, so she's like a ghost.
That's right, it's her worst nightmare. She's fading away like Marty McFly's parents.
Mr. Ratburn like crosses her name off, just like, I'm gonna have to call her parents. This is the third day she hasn't been here. And then everybody runs away and like forgets her, and she just goes, this is so depressing. But that was very Fern. And of course, Sue Ellen scores way over 100, and so hers is that people are frightened by her excellence and overachieving. Her cutaway is that they're all playing together in music class.
She's essentially Lisa in the Simpsons opening.
Kinda, yeah. Especially right down to the saxophone. And it's like her cutaway is that they're playing in music class, and she does like this awesome saxophone solo. And tellingly, all of the guys get super unconfident next to her. Like, Buster's just like, oh, what's the point? I'll never be as good as Sue Ellen. We get a good one here.
I love this line from Arthur. Yeah.
He slams his head on the keyboard, and in this very robotic delivery just goes, I'm frightened of her excellence. And
the comedic timing of the sound of his head hitting the keyboard, as well as the delivery of that line, really sell it.
My favorite is Binky, who gets in Sue Ellen's face and says, "I might as well stick my tongue in a drawer and never blow again." What a line. So they both decide that they have to change immediately, or else they could be like this for the rest of their lives. So they're going to be different for the rest of their spring break together.
That's right. There's a great moment here where they talk about, because this episode could all fall apart, because obviously the logic is, this says they won't have friends, but they already have friends. But one of them comes up with the idea that, well, this could be talking about, it's a teen magazine, so they have friends now, but if they continue this behavior, they'll lose all their friends once they become teens.
Yeah, it could be predicting the future. So the next day they're doing a karate demonstration, and
which this seems more like judo than a karate.
It's very throw-based. Karate's more striking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good call. Of course, you being the MMA fan, you know right away that it's like judo is more of the throwing.
Yeah. It's either judo or maybe like a taekwondo, but it's definitely not karate because there's no Anyway, that's just my little nerdy.
So the whole thing of the next couple of sequences is that, Sue Ellen is underplaying her own confidence and essentially making herself less confident by just, doubting everything. And because Mr. Ratburn says, let's get a demonstration from our expert Sue Ellen. And she says, I'm no expert. I'm average or less. So kind of really underselling herself, whereas Fern will be incredibly demonstrative and assertive, which is very unlike her, which I did like. I liked seeing that side of Fern's personality. So here it's like Sue Ellen and Buster are
this is
together.
So great because Buster's like so afraid of like stepping into the octagon with Sue Ellen.
Yeah, it's like he's gonna fight Steve Blackman or something. And then Buster actually ends up flipping Sue Ellen because, of course, she's not really gonna put up much of a fight. And then Buster's like, "Wow, I flipped Sue Ellen. I must be good." And then Binky steps in. He's like, if he can do that, I can do that. And did you notice this? Like, Binky power bombs Sue Ellen.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Binky straight up power bombs her.
Like, he gives her the diesel jackknife. Like, I'm looking at it right now. It's like a picture perfect power bomb. Thank God none of these kids are hurt or anything. And Binky points out
quite a violent elementary school.
Yeah. And Binky points out that this victory feels hollow, because Sue Ellen wasn't trying. But then Fern flies in and she does essentially turns Buster upside down and throws him at the wall. And
Buster kind of slides down onto his head, and he's like, we get a fun little pun here where Buster's talking about it's like the world's upside down because Fern and Sue Ellen are acting so strange, but also because he's literally upside down.
The next thing is Muffy and Brains group trying to figure out basket weaving. So they go to ask.
Here we get one of the most random lines ever spoken in Arthur history.
Is it Fern's line?
It's Muffy's line. Sue Ellen, you were in Belgium. Do you know any reliable looming techniques?
You know what? I didn't. That one totally didn't even register with me. That is funny. We do get a line here from Fern, and again, it's weird to have her I should say it's good by her voice actor to have her voice be so versatile, because we never hear Fern kind of speak above the octave she normally talks in. So Fern goes up to the basket and she goes silver, please go with red, and she sounds like a completely different person.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. There's a moment in the next episode we're going to talk about where Buster sort of has to talk like an adult, and I was wondering if that's closer to the voice actor's real voice than the Buster voice is. Similarly, I wonder if this voice, even though she's kind of putting on a Valley Girl accent, I wonder if the volume she's speaking at is closer to the voice actress's real voice as opposed to the very quiet Fern voice.
I will say, I think that Fern is one of my favorite parts of this episode, thinking about it now, because the next day they're trying to make musical instruments that's in Sue Ellen and Fern's group with Francine and Arthur, and Fern bursts through the door and addresses everybody by saying, "Okay, potato chips," which is great. Next time I burst into a room, that's what I'm going to say.
And that's what, and you know what? I just realized that's like a reference to the start of the episode because they're her friends.
Yeah, exactly.
Your friends are the potato chips. Oh my goodness, I didn't even pick up on that.
So Fern asserts herself as leader, and Francine's like, well, Sue Ellen, what do you think about this? Sue Ellen kind of says nothing, and then Fern says, Sue Ellen and I have agreed she has no opinion on this.
One of the great dynamics of this episode is both Sue Ellen and Fern are like putting on characters when they're in front of the other friends, but when it's just them together, they sort of revert back to their real selves and they sort of go over the experience. And I think that's a really cute touch of like when everyone's in the room, like Fern is yelling at everybody and Sue Ellen's all meek, and then they like go back to their true personalities once everybody leaves and sort of compare notes about the experience.
So essentially, them becoming different people has led to a chain reaction of this entire spring break camp melting down, which leads to my favorite thing of this whole thing.
Binky's going through an existential crisis about Sue Ellen flipping him. Like, he still hasn't let it go. He's like, she let me flip her. That means she doesn't even consider, like, it's totally, like, destroyed his worldview.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was my favorite part of just, like, him. He's lying down on the ground with half of their Trojan horse costume. So that means he just has a giant horse head over, like, half of his body. And he's just, like, I wrote down existential crisis as well. He's just completely despondent because he doesn't think... He feels that Sue Ellen doesn't think he's worth flipping anymore. So they're talking, Sue Ellen and Fern are talking about how they thought this was going to make them happier, but everybody is less happy. And then everybody else finds that they dug up the Popular Girl magazine, and Francine denounces it as that magazine is just goofy. So
gorge.
Yuck. So they decide to get rid of it, and they affirm that they like Fern and Sue Ellen the way that they are. So everything essentially...
Buster asks if they skewed the results by asking if they're by saying their friends are diet soda.
Yeah, that may have brought down your score. So they bring everything back to normal. Sue Ellen helps the basket weavers. Fern makes an instrument, and Sue Ellen gives Binky a tilt-a-whirl gut-wrench suplex, and he is immediately ready to finish the Trojan horse.
Almost gave him a tour of the island.
Yeah. Oh, man. Oh, that's the closest we're ever going to get to Jeff Cobb and Arthur. That makes me sad.
Jeff Cobb would make a great Binky.
Oh,
he's got the perfect proportions.
Oh, man, maybe that's why I like Binky and or Jeff Cobb so much. Hey, kids, look up Jeff Cobb suplex on YouTube, and yeah, just check out that business. It's one of my favorite.
Put that guy in an orange dress shirt, and that's basically human Binky.
Oh, Halloween 2018, Jeff Cobb, please. So we end the episode. They've successfully made their instruments. They've made the Trojan horse. In fact, they've managed to make the group with Brain and Muffy have managed to make a cloth that is indestructible, so that they can't actually go ahead with their project.
Which is great because we get. I like the Muffy and Brain pairing as well. I think we've had that before in the episode where. Or at least it was like Muffy versus Brain in the episode where Brain wanted revenge. But Muffy is like, oh, we made it too strong with the silver. I can't cut up the fabric. And then Brain's like, excellent.
And the episode ends with Mr. Ratburn digging up the Popular Girl quiz and realizing, according to this, I don't give out enough homework.
Right, Mr. Ratburn got a score over 200, whereas Sue Ellen got a score over 100. And apparently if you get over 200, it assumes you're a teacher and says you're not assigning enough homework, which is a cute ending, I think.
Assumes you're a narc. And now, a word from us kids. So
what are these made instruments called again? They talk about it earlier in the episode. Francine kind of calls them the wrong name, and then Sue Ellen...
idiophones.
Idiophones.
So yeah, these kids are making homemade instruments, which I thought was kind of a neat project. I don't think I ever did that when I was in school.
I mean, they really stretch the term instrument. They're kids. I'm very impressed. Listen, I don't want to hate on these kids' instruments, but I will say not all instruments are created equal. For instance, the ones that made percussion instruments, those will make actual music and beats far more than the people who made the elastic band guitars. You gotta use your imagination to think of the sound those make as musical.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of differ in terms of like difficulty and sound and everything. I will say that some of the sounds kind of sound like they were edited in post production, which is not like that's not a call out or anything. It's just like, well, maybe they didn't make the sounds that they kind of thought that they would.
So that's my favorite thing about this whole section. Besides the one kid who goes, we're gonna have a nice jam session here. Except he almost stumbles on the word jam session and says jam section, kind of.
Okay.
But anyway, the other favorite thing is there's a part at the end where the camera is panning on all the kids playing their instruments at once, but the music is very obviously added in post to make a song with like an actual melody.
Yeah.
And so my question is, I bet the raw footage and raw audio is hilarious of all these kids just like playing their instruments in unison with no beat, or like everybody's like, I bet it just sounds hilarious, just like everybody playing at once. It's like that SpongeBob episode where they're kind of trying to do a band practice, and it's like before their band gets good, it's like everybody playing at the same time with no sense of melody whatsoever, and it just sounds like noise.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess they had to sweeten it a little bit, you're right. But it's kind of a cool project, and their designs on...
No, it is a cool project. I hate to be a hater.
Yeah.
It's cool.
And the designs on them are pretty cool, too.
Mm.
And now, back to Arthur.
All right, here we go with our second story. It's called Buster's Growing Grudge. And the episode starts off with Arthur, go figure. He's talking about how he and people he knows get upset about things. We actually start this off like right away, like it's like Arthur talking about all the times DW has gotten upset. And then we get
this hilarious like picture-in-picture.
Yeah, we get this like Hollywood Squares-esque look at all the times DW has been upset, and it's like not even half of the first season. There's like these 6 instances where it's like DW screaming and crying, and then they just kind of overload Arthur, and he's like, okay, maybe DW gets a bit more upset than most people. Another example is Francine, who thought that she was going to score a game-winning home run in baseball, but then the wind shifted, and someone from Mighty Mountain accidentally caught the ball, and Francine was really upset. Another one...
Francine channeling Tom Brady here. Ayo!
Brain was excited about a probe going to Saturn, but then realizes that the probe won't get to Saturn for 7 years. To which he says, how can I stand waiting 7 years for photos of Saturn? And then finally, the whole thing ends up with Arthur building up Buster as the person who never gets angry or upset, and kind of like has him in almost like his own title card, and then like unveils some curtains, and it's like Buster Baxter, the happiest, jolliest, most fun, but he doesn't realize that Buster has like his ears are downturned, he's got a sour look on his face. And then Buster like turns away in anger, and then Arthur's like, hey, what's wrong? And we have to figure out, well, why Buster is upset. The episode itself starts off with Buster watching Bionic Bunny, who is supposedly needing to get some medicine for some character named Aunt Bob.
Bionic Bunny sort of playing the Balto role here.
Good one. But Bitsy asks Buster if he's done his homework yet, and I love this. Buster kind of tries to lie and then doesn't. He's just like, Buster, did you finish your homework? Yeah, almost. Well, actually, no. So Buster goes to do his homework, doesn't see how Bionic Bunny ends. So essentially, he doesn't get the time to properly do a report that he's supposed to do. He just spends all night coming up with a joke, because he heard in like when it comes to presentations, if you end with a joke, then it will improve your presentation, which I think is fairly sound. A lot of the more memorable, more memorable presentations you hear have humor in them.
Absolutely. A funny thing happened on the way to the show tonight. Yeah, I 110% agree.
So he's got a joke he wants to try out, and he goes to Binky, asks if he can try it out on him, and then Binky's...
This is just good comedy right here. What happens next is like, this is like a Simpsons joke or something. This is just funny.
Binky says, sure, I like to laugh as much as the next guy. Then like one of the unnamed extras just like comes through the shot, like muttering just like, oh no, oh dear, oh my. And then Binky's like, okay, the guy after the next guy. Yeah, it was pretty good. So Buster's joke is, what does King Tut say when he gets scared? I want my mummy, which, joke book quality, but Buster came up with it on his own. So, and it does get a laugh. So Binky, so it seems that will be surefire for his presentation. The whole presentation, by the way, and this is relating back to our anonymous Tumblr ask, is that it's a report on somebody's favorite historical figure. Binky's favorite historical figure is Christopher Columbus.
Ooh, problematic Binky.
Yeah, well, he's young yet. He has time to learn, which I guess makes Buster's report about King Tut. So yeah, Binky finishes his report, and Buster's all raring to do his, and then all of a sudden, Binky just joke jacks Buster and kind of ruins the joke a little bit. Like his Binky's setup is what King Tut said when the Sphinx scared him, and then everybody laughs, but Buster is horrified that Buster's essentially Bill Hicks and Binky is Dennis Leary, and he's just like he took my joke.
We get a great vertigo zoom on Buster's face, like Buster's mind crushed by the audacity of Binky taking his joke.
Yeah, the reverse dolly zoom kind of, and Buster's like he's completely in shock, like that same tone of voice I just used is what he did, and of course because without that joke, his report is basically nothing because he spent more time on the joke than he did the report. We get this. Oh man, I don't know how to describe this. Like this freaked me out. So Buster goes up to the front of the class, and everybody's looking at him, including Ratburn. He kind of looks at his paper, then looks up again, and everybody's face is replaced by a giant eyeball. Like their facial features are gone, and it's just they're all giant blinking eyes. It's like if you're not ready for it, it's gonna scare you.
It's like Buster logged on to Quake 3 Arena. Everybody's playing as that eyeball guy.
Was there an eyeball guy in Quake 3 Arena?
Oh, yeah, that's the best character model. I forget his name. Oh, you keep talking. I got to figure out. Okay, Quake 3 Arena eyeball, because he definitely has a name.
Okay. See, I just remember the normal characters from Quake 3 Arena. I used to play the demo a lot, so I don't... Orb. Okay.
He's got little legs, and he's an eyeball.
I mean...
The best character model, by far.
I can't say what this reminds me of. It seems like what would happen if, you let Earthbound spoil for a couple of days. Then it comes up with this nightmarish thing. So Buster tries to recover with a different joke. Like what do you call two banana peels, but everybody knows the punchline, a pair of slippers.
Yeah, they sort of like exasperate. They're like so bored and like he's like, what do you call a pair of banana peels? And everybody kind of responds back, a pair of slippers.
So
just took the air out of the room completely.
So after the report, they're all on the tire swings, and Buster is completely obsessed with the fact that Binky took his joke. And at first, Francine and Arthur are just like, "Yeah, that's too bad. He shouldn't have done that." Anyway, you want to do this, but Buster's just like, "He took my joke. Binky took my joke." And then it turns out that Buster gets a D on his report, and what a D it is. Like, Arthur even remarks on it later, like, Mr. Ratburn does, like, a cursive D, and he's like, no matter how fancy you write a D, it's still a D. Like, it's a nice-looking D.
Throw some D's on that paper.
Yeah, so, again, Buster is still wrapped up in the fact, like, for days afterward, like, he's with Arthur at different, like, social functions and just saying, like...
Who ends a Columbus report with the joke about King Tut? Which actually is... You know what? That's a pretty good criticism.
Yeah, no, that's legitimate. And I did have that quote written down. Buster yells that in a crowded movie theater while a movie is playing, which is really funny.
Right, and Francine's there, and she's like, Binky does now, shh.
Yeah, Binky does now. Shh. Like, just really quiet him down. But this is, like, eating him alive, we're supposed to understand.
Yeah, Buster really has, like, a Count of Monte Cristo thing going on where he's, like, consumed by revenge.
Buster later finds out during a soccer game that Binky got a B+ on his report, which he attributes to him stealing the joke. And Buster has an imagination that, like, it's Binky telling the joke again, but Mr. Ratburn is, like starts laughing wildly and falls out of his chair. I love Ratburn's uncontrollable laughter. It's like he's a hyena or something.
He says, I was going to give you an F, but that joke, you deserve a higher grade.
Yeah, that's great. Just Buster again becoming completely unreasonable and unrealistic.
Right. At this point, Buster's like totally. He's so consumed with his grudge against Binky that he's not seeing. He's missing the forest for the trees because it wasn't because of his joke that Binky got a high grade. It's because it was a good presentation. If you remember the little bit of Binky's presentation we hear at the start of the episode, it's actually pretty well researched. Like, it seems like he's coming to a conclusion that references all his previous paragraphs, even though he's talking about Chris Columbus. The joke probably hurt him more than helped him because it was totally unrelated. Whereas Buster did absolutely no research and spent all of his time on his joke, so that's probably why he got a bad grade. They're most definitely totally unrelated.
Yeah, and this is where the episode really started to turn for me of like this started to get really interesting because again, like Arthur said in the beginning, this is a side of Buster's personality we've never seen and how he really is letting his hatred for Binky consume him. Kids, you'll have to allow me a little bit of leeway here. I'm going to talk about wrestling again for just a little bit. So Buster's hate goes from like Binky's joke theft, and then he just thinks that Binky doesn't deserve to be funny. Like there's this whole conversation at the Sugar Bowl. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Buster is so consumed that like he accidentally scores the winning goal in soccer, but he's like still Binky told my joke, and and then Francine's like, well, stop telling us. Why don't you go and tell Binky? And he goes to walk up to Binky, and it's like, hey, Binky, and then we get this shot of like him looming over Buster, and so Buster chickens out because like, have you ever noticed how large Binky is? And then he's like, I'll never be able to get back at Binky. And then Binky accidentally slips in mud and finds himself covered head to toe. And Buster starts laughing because he thinks that that's kind of the just desserts. But then Binky starts laughing, like he kind of laughs it off, and everybody's laughing. And then he's like, Arthur's like, now what's wrong? He's like, it's like they think Binky's funny. And this leads into, so it goes beyond Buster being upset that Binky stole his joke. Now he thinks that Binky doesn't deserve to be funny. We get this whole kind of almost a monologue in the Sugar Bowl about how...
Oh, my God.
About how...
The first of two, I might add.
Yeah, we get this whole thing about how Buster, like, dedicates his life to comedy. Like, he's the one who memorizes joke books, practices making funny faces in the mirror. Like, he's the funny guy. And now it's like Binky is kind of, like, basically... tripping into his territory, and it's upsetting Buster because of all the hard work he does. So again, here's the wrestling reference, kids. Buster reminded me a lot of like the character of Bret Hart here, of kind of like, you know, I'm the best wrestler / comedian in the world, and then this Binky, this stone cold Steve Austin, he thinks that he can come in here and say that he's better than me, even though he's clearly not. And so it's like we go from this beloved figure of Buster into this different person who is still Buster, but it's this other side of him is completely tainting his personality. It's really interesting.
Yeah, this episode is like the first Arthur episode I've seen yet that's like basically a character study. And it's a character study of like evil Buster, like Buster with a goatee. And it's just funny seeing his descent into like obsession.
Yeah, I feel like like Buster is almost like Robert De Niro in The King of Comedy here. Like it's like this episode was guest directed by Martin Scorsese or something.
During his Sugar Bowl rant, he goes, Binky doesn't care about funny.
Yeah, it's like, it's me who cares about funny. And it's like, he's really cutting promos on Binky.
While he's like shoving a banana in his like mouth to make a big smile, and then when he talks about Binky, he sort of turns it upside down so it's a big frowny face.
And then he eats
multiple levels.
And then he eats that banana in one mouthful, which is pretty impressive. So the talent show is coming up, and Buster's going to use that opportunity to show up Binky, which we think is just like he's going to be, you know, put on this really killer set, and he's going to prove that he is the funniest in the school. We cut to the talent show. Sue Ellen does a demonstration where she kicks the head off a scarecrow, which Mr. Ratburn calls a demonstration of pumpkin kicking. And
that's my favorite 90s alternative rock band, the Kicking Pumpkins.
And Buster comes out to do his set, and Arthur and Francine are just like, well, at least now he can't talk about how Binky stole his joke. And then Buster proceeds to do like 45 seconds, like again, like a promo. Like he's basically looking into the hard cam, which is the audience, and talking, not really doing anything funny, but he's just plainly laying out the situation where Binky stole his joke.
This is like a trope I've seen in other things too, where like someone's going on stage to do a stand-up comedy performance and instead like totally just like talks about their own life, and it's like really, really like off-putting to the audience. This is something I've seen in like multiple movies and shows, and it's always a funny situation to me, especially when they cut back to backstage and like Francine and Arthur's like horror at that Buster's not telling jokes at all. He's just like going on a rant. Though he does sneak one joke in there where he's talking to the audience and goes, "Have you guys heard about this Binky guy? Yeah, he did a report about Columbus. That's Italian for boy, am I lost," which is a pretty solid joke.
Yeah, like there was stuff in there, but it was also very angry. It reminds me of, if you ever saw The Big Sick last year, there's a couple of...
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking of, was that part of The Big Sick.
Yeah, where Kumail Nanjiani is just kind of like pouring his heart out about his life, essentially, and it's not really comedic, it's just kind of sad. And this one is not so much sad, it's angry. My favorite part of this whole thing is that we actually get the start of a running gag here of how like George wins all the talent shows because of his like pogo stick abilities. And it cuts back to Buster, and he just goes, "I can't believe I didn't win." Like, he's so clouded that not only did he think like he actually did comedy, he thought it was good enough that he should have won.
Amazing line from Buster when Arthur goes, "But Buster, you didn't tell any jokes." And then Buster goes, "Comedy of truth. All the greats do it."
And then he's just like, I should have told jokes. This is all Binky's fault." And so we get then we get this cutaway where Arthur thinks that Buster will be mad at Binky for the rest of his life. This
is amazing.
This is awesome. So it's Buster and Arthur in 3 stages of their life in the future. The first one is them at college. It's even Arthur being like, "Wow, Buster, our first day of college." And
they're like dressed like they're in like Animal House, like total classic like 1950s college varsity outfits.
Yeah, Arthur's got a striped sweater and Buster has the Letterman's jacket. And which has the B on the back. And of course, they get to, the voice actors get to kind of age up their voices a little bit. So he's like, "Wow, Buster, our first day of college." And Buster's like, "Binky's not here, is he? He told my joke. It was a good joke." And Arthur just kind of groans. My favorite one is the second one, where Buster becomes the president of the United States and is giving an address to to different nations, which I must say some of them are kind of stereotypically dressed. Like, they've got the Scots.
Yeah.
They got the Scots.
I can't tell if these were actually like ambassadors from a country or like Mike Tyson's Punch-Out enemies, because like you said, the Scotsman straight up wearing like a kilt. I think there's someone from some sort of East Asian country wearing their traditional dress. Like, it is very like almost caricatures.
I thought it was weird that Soda Popinski was in the group. So we get to hear Buster's aged up voice even more, and but it's kind of to the point of it being funny. Like, I still remember this line from years later of just, "Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States," and we just hear Buster go, "Binky told my joke. It was in Mr. Ratburn's 3rd grade class, and he and he starts crying." Like, he leads off his address with that. It's almost, I hate to bring him up, but it's almost Trumpian in how...
I wrote down very Trumpian on my notes, because in the 90s, it'd be like, "Oh, this is crazy. A president would never, like, hold a grudge like this." But, like, I mean, if you'll indulge me for a moment, "Failing Binky, stole my joke in the 4th grade, hasn't come up with an original thing in his life. It's my joke. It's all the best jokes. I wrote it.
You know me, I come up with the best jokes. The best jokes.
I come up with the best. It's all the best jokes. I'm very funny. People tell me I'm funny all the time."
Yeah, and he's even got kind of the blonde comb over a little bit. So
I know it's you know how people always say The Simpsons predicts the future. This might be another case of Arthur predicting the future.
Could be. And then the final thing is Arthur and Buster as old men playing golf, which I did like seeing. I did like seeing their.
This is my favorite one.
I did like seeing their designs. And again, they get to talk as if they're old men. So it's like, Arthur's like, "If I make this shot, it's the best game of my life."
Like, the delivery on that, the scenario is hilarious. Like, the fact that, like, Arthur's about to play his perfect game of golf and he cares so deeply about it. And then his, like, delivery of that line, like, "If I make this shot." And then, of course, Buster's still ranting about Binky and he misses the shot.
Like, as just as Arthur's about to take the swing, he just goes, "He told my joke. It was a good King Tut joke." And Arthur totally whiffs on the shot. So Arthur tries in vain to get Buster to leave this grudge alone. Arthur's kind of the one who does the I guess you would say the proselytizing, or like the or what am I trying to say here? He's the one who's delivering the message, essentially, of the episode.
Yes.
Is that if you let this consume you, then it will just it'll burn a hole in you for the rest of your life, and it won't make you happy. They have to lay this out plain a couple of times, like it's Arthur saying that staying mad about something is not going to change it, and you can't let it destroy you. But I'm glad that they did, because sometimes I feel like these messages can get lost in the weeds a little bit, especially considering how I think Buster's hateful character is actually pretty entertaining. But you've got to have the message there of, like, this is bad. Like, Buster is doing himself a disservice here. In fact, he's not even really listening to Arthur. He just says, I know what I have to do now, Arthur. I need a time machine so that I can go back and change the past so that Binky never tells my joke. And to which Arthur says, you can't change the past, Buster. And he's like, oh, I can't I? And then he asks the same question.
Smash cut to Brain, who goes, you can't change the past, Buster. And he's like, oh.
Oh, rats. So Buster ends up skipping stones down by the pier, I guess. Arthur relates a story of how he didn't get a green birthday cake for his 4th birthday. And he's still mad about it, and he's going to stay mad until he gets it, to which Buster's like, that's silly. How do you expect to get something like that? And then Arthur's like, well, you seem to be thinking the same thing. And Buster responds with, but Binky, essentially he's saying that, like, Binky didn't deserve to take his joke that he worked really hard for and get a better grade. But then Arthur comes back with, Buster, you barely did any work on your report at all. Your whole report was about eggnog. And Buster says, that's not my fault. They put it next to Egypt in the encyclopedia.
Which I remember that. Have you ever done a report off an encyclopedia before?
I remember my family had a set of encyclopedias, but I never read them very much.
When I was in school, like elementary school, I always loved like looking at like a random thing in the encyclopedia and reading the whole article. Like I remember reading the passage about oranges in the encyclopedia, so I could see getting lost in the eggnog.
And then Buster kind of pretty quickly comes to the realization of, like, yeah, you know what? This was kind of my fault, and I don't want to, and I should talk to Binky about this. And as luck would have it, Binky roller skates up to them. Binky rocking the belly shirt.
Yeah, love Binky's like 80s roller skater outfit.
So Buster goes up to him and says, I just wanted to tell you that I'm not mad at you anymore. And Binky is completely oblivious to what he's talking about. And Buster even has to remind him what the joke was that Binky told. He says it again, and Binky's like, hey, that's a good one. And again, like, Buster has to really remind him, because I guess Binky didn't think that much about telling the joke. Of just like, you took that joke, the joke that I was going to use in my report. And Binky's defense of himself is, when somebody tells you a joke, you're supposed to tell it to somebody else.
Oof, Binky. I feel like I've worked with a lot of people who follow Binky's philosophy around humor and are like, hey, I was watching this Dane Cook special the other night, and then repeat it word for word to me, and I go, oh, there you go. That 5 minutes I'm never gonna get back.
But Binky does go a little bit further. He says, I didn't mean to steal it, and then reaches into his pocket and gives Buster 73 cents, a sticker of a cool car, and a button. For accidentally stealing his joke. And Buster kind of looks at it for a second, and then he realizes, I got paid for writing a joke. I'm a professional! So it all kind of turned out okay, and Buster kind of sees this as a victory, and vindicating of how much of his life is dedicated to studying comedy. And then,
yeah, he goes up to Binky, and he's like, with your natural, funniness and my writing ability, we're going to make you into a big star. And Binky's like, I can have my own show?
And he's like, yeah, you can have your own show. You and me and Arthur. And the final line of the episode is Binky saying, it's like, you and me, maybe, but I don't think Arthur. Who'd want to watch him on TV? All right, so let's rewind it back. First story we talked about was Popular Girls. What'd you think?
I liked Popular Girls, mostly because I think that episode That episode wouldn't work at all, I don't think, if it wasn't for Fern and Sue Ellen. It's really fun. Both of these episodes are examples of characters sort of getting turned on their head in a way that we don't normally see them. Whether it's Buster turning into like a grudge-obsessed nightmare, or if it's Fern being very assertive, uncharacteristically so, or Sue Ellen trying to be meek on purpose. And it's always interesting seeing these kids sort of try to change themselves in this unnatural way. And I just really like the dynamic of Fern and Sue Ellen together. I mean, in the third half, the plot kind of drags a little bit. It's one of those cases where you can kind of see where it's going, but not a particularly standout episode, but enjoyable nonetheless. Funny too. There's some great lines in it, especially like seeing like Sue Ellen get like power bobbed by Binky, and then Binky being like consumed by like, oh no, she let me win. That's like extra funny to me.
In the third half, eh?
Oh.
Sorry, just got a little chuckle out of that. So I will admit that I did like the spotlight on the secondary characters, especially Fern and Sue Ellen as well. But Fern is one of my favorite characters, so that I liked. But I got to be honest, I didn't have a lot to say about this episode. My notes are
neither did I really.
My notes are very sparse, and it kind of didn't really stick with me very much. I mean, I thought it was okay enough, but it's definitely not my favorite anything, and not particularly something that I had a lot of thoughts on either. So it just kind of came and went. I don't really have much to say about it. It's kind of a unusual premise for an episode, so I'll give it that. But aside from those things I mentioned, it's okay. Now, Buster's Growing Grudge, I liked quite a bit more, and it's like you said before, Lucas. That's a great point, that this really is a character study. It's a side of Buster that we may never get to see again, but knowing that it's there is so much enriches the character. Now, of knowing that Buster has this like vindictive side, and of how borderline obsessive he is about comedy. So like not only like it goes from Buster being kind of the jokester, the class clown, to like he's the guy that you hear about like of your Jimmy Fallons or your cast members of SNL who like study comedy and like the art and the theory and science of comedy.
Right.
So like he's
particular the line about like it's comedy of truth. All the greats do it. From that line alone, you could tell that Buster is like a scholar of the art of comedy. I know exactly what you're saying.
And I just found it really interesting how Buster continued to justify his actions, and I thought it made a lot of sense. I thought the writing here was really sharp of how like Buster never blames himself until the very end because he's just so consumed by his contempt for Binky. And I mean that's how you write great heels. Essentially, Buster kind of does a little bit of a heel turn in this episode, and I thought it was really cool. But in a low stakes enough scenario where it's like that nothing is really on the line here except for Buster's pride, but sometimes that's all it takes. So yeah, I know I really like this episode. I found it very interesting to watch.
I also like the nuance of they sort of like Buster's kind of justified in the beginning. Like Binky did steal his joke, and though it probably wouldn't have saved Buster's presentation, you shouldn't be stealing people's jokes. I mean, notable Instagram stars have been called out for the exact same thing. But it also shows no matter how justified Buster was in the beginning, he totally overreacts and sort of lets it consume him to a point where it's getting in the way of him living his life. And as Arthur fears, like the rest of his life until they're like senior citizens. So I think this episode is a really, really interesting episode and a great character study, like you said, of a side of Buster we don't normally get to see. But I also like how justified and realistic Buster's sort of obsession is.
Yeah, for sure. And especially considering how like oblivious Binky was to what he did.
Yeah, as per usual, Binky, every time Binky's in anything, it's always a breakout performance.
So yeah, I would say the second half of the episode I liked a lot better than the first, but it's it's all still worth it in the end. All right, so unless there's anything else, let's get into the end of the show and the plugs.
So, of course, don't forget, on social media, facebook.com/Elwood City Limits. We're over 100 likes. Thank you, everybody. Let's keep it going. And if you've got a review to leave, you can do it there. At ECL Podcast, we got a couple of interesting things on Twitter happen recently. First of all, I will say one of our next episodes was recently purchased on videotape, or at least seen on videotape, by @JacobMiller033. So that was kind of in my mind. And we did get a new follower who I'd like to give a special shout-out to. That would be Jessica Cardos, who is the voice of Sue Ellen.
Oh my goodness, that's crazy.
Yes, hello.
I didn't know that.
Hello, Jessica, if you're listening. Thank you very much for your follow, and love to talk to you sometime.
I believe in early episodes we've praised Jessica for having a distinct and different voice. I think when Sue Ellen's character was first introduced, that was one of the things I mentioned. So that's really cool that she followed the podcast.
I just want to make sure, like, she may be the more recent voice of Sue Ellen. So let me just look that up real quick. Sue Ellen, yes. So she's been on since season 10.
Oh. Well, still,
yeah,
I'm still very excited
and
about
I look
that.
forward to hearing from her. Again, that's ECL Podcast. On Tumblr, you can ask us things like our wonderful listeners did, elwoodcitylimits.tumblr.com. You can also send us emails, elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. Finally, the places to find us and keep listening. elwoodcitylimits.libsyn.com is our homepage, LIBSYN. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts and on the Google Play Store. If you'd like us to be anywhere else, just give us a contact at any of the places we mentioned. Okay, Lucas, next time we gather, Season 3 rolls on, and these two I'm going to be very interested to revisit. It's Arthur's Treasure Hunt, followed by Return of the King.
It's the Return of the King.
Return of the King. Oh, my God.
Oh, my God.
Here I go. So yes, don't worry. It's not the extended edition of Arthur's Return of the King. We're just doing the standard version.
Wow, Buster's like on Mount Doom for like an hour and a half.
And they cut out this whole character from this episode. Can't believe it. So until next time, keep on watching Arthur Season 3, and we'll be back with you before you know it. My name's Will Young, and for Lucas Mancini,
what's a prom?
See you next time.
He told my joke! He told my joke! He told my joke! He told my joke! Binky told my joke! It was my joke! Binky told my joke! He told my joke that I wrote! He told my joke! It was a good joke!
Binky told my joke! He told my joke! It was a good King Tut joke!